Have you ever stood on a mountain and felt the silence speak to you? The air was cool and thin. The valley below seemed endless. A woman stood at the edge of a stone path, looking out at the green hills rolling away in every direction. She held very still. Then something reached her ears. It was not music. It was not wind. It was a sound moving through the air like a living thing. Long and curved, rising and falling. It passed through the trees and crossed the open sky. She turned her head. She listened harder. The sound came again, closer this time. It sounded like a whistle, but it was not just a whistle. It carried something that felt like a word. She did not know it yet, but that single sound was about to change everything for her. Her whole journey was just beginning. Ruby was 34 years old. She worked as a sound researcher at a small university in the city. She had one physical detail that people always noticed first. Her left ear had a small scar from an accident when she was 7. She never tried to hide it. She wore her hair pulled back, always. Ruby's routine was simple and a little sad. She spent most of her days recording and studying disappearing sounds, old bells, dying languages, forgotten songs. She believed these things mattered deeply. But her department head did not agree. He gave her less funding each year. He told her that her work had no practical value. She kept going anyway. She borrowed equipment. She applied for small grants. She stayed late, alone in the lab. Her colleagues thought she was chasing ghosts. Maybe she was. But Ruby believed that every lost sound was a lost piece of the world, and she was not ready to let the world become quieter. The warnings came slowly. They always do. Ruby's grant application was rejected for the 3rd time in 2 years. She read the letter twice, then set it down carefully on her desk. Her hands were steady, but something behind her eyes was not. Her supervisor called her into his office that same week. He sat across from her with a polite expression that said nothing good. He told her that her research area was too narrow. He suggested she might consider a different focus. Something more modern, he said. Her students began to notice too. They arrived late to her lectures. They looked at their phones during her presentations on acoustic heritage. One student asked her, quietly but honestly, why any of this still mattered today. Ruby told herself it was a difficult season. She told herself that important work always faced resistance. She was patient. She was persistent. She believed the right moment was still coming. She was wrong about the timing, but she did not know that yet. The specific moment came on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. Ruby had prepared a detailed presentation for the department review committee. She had spent 3 weeks organizing her research notes. She had recorded audio samples. She had made careful visual charts. The committee listened for 11 minutes. Then the department head raised his hand. He told her, in front of everyone, that her project on acoustic heritage was officially losing its funding. He said the university needed to focus on areas with clear results. He gave her project to a younger researcher who had no background in the field. Ruby stood at the front of the room. She did not speak. Her throat felt closed. She packed her materials into her bag slowly, one item at a time. A colleague patted her shoulder on the way out. She did not feel it. She sat in the parking lot for 50 minutes. She did not start the engine. The sky turned from gray to darker gray. She thought about everything she had built, and she thought about how quickly it had been taken away. Three weeks passed. Ruby did not go back to the lab. She stayed in her apartment. The curtains stayed closed. She ate very little. Her notebooks sat on the table, unopened. One morning, she knocked her old recording device off the shelf. It hit the floor hard. The small screen cracked. She looked at it. She did not pick it up. That was the moment. Not a loud moment, a quiet one. The quietest kind of breaking. She sat down on the floor beside it. She did not cry. She felt something worse than crying. She felt empty. Her phone showed 7 missed calls. She did not return them. The world outside kept moving. She could hear it faintly: cars, birds, a child somewhere. All of it felt very far away. She had given years to saving sounds, and now she was the one who had gone completely quiet. It began with a letter, a real one on paper. It arrived on a Wednesday. Ruby almost did not open it. It was from a woman named Marta. She was a village elder from a mountain community in the Canary Islands. She had read one of Ruby's old published papers. She had written to ask for help. Marta wrote that her village still used something very old, a whistled language. People called it Silbo. It had been used for centuries to carry messages across the deep valleys. But the young people were forgetting it, and Marta was afraid it would disappear before anyone recorded it properly. Ruby read the letter once, then she read it again. She sat with it for a long time. She did not feel suddenly better. Healing is not sudden, but something small changed that day. She thought about Marta, an old woman writing by hand to a stranger, still caring, still reaching out, still refusing to let something precious disappear. Ruby had one idea. It was small and specific. She would go to the village. She would record the language herself. No university, no funding, just her equipment, and whatever time she had left. Ruby did not book the flight right away. She sat with the idea for 2 full days. Then, on a Friday morning, she opened her laptop. She searched for the village. She found a small photo of a green hillside. She booked the cheapest flight available. Her hands were not steady when she typed her card details, but she pressed the button anyway. She pulled her old recording equipment from the shelf. She cleaned each piece carefully with a soft cloth. The cracked recorder she placed in a small bag. She was not sure it still worked, but she packed it anyway. She wrote back to Marta by hand. She told her she was coming. She was not sure of everything, but she was coming. She packed one bag. It was not a big bag. She looked around her apartment before leaving. It looked the same as always, but she felt different standing in it. She stepped outside. The air hit her face. She breathed in slowly. It was the first deep breath she had taken in weeks. The village was smaller than Ruby expected. It sat between 2 steep green ridges. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. Marta met her at the edge of the village path. She was a small woman with white hair and careful eyes. She did not speak much at first. She simply nodded and led Ruby up the hill. After 3 days, Ruby had her first real recording. An elderly man named Tomas sat on a low wall and whistled a full sentence across the valley. The sound traveled far. It was answered 2 minutes later by someone on the opposite ridge. Ruby held her recorder very still. She listened back to the recording that evening. She heard the shape of the language clearly. Each note had direction. Each curve carried meaning. It was not random. It was structured. It was alive. After 1 week, she had recordings of 12 different whistled conversations. After 2 weeks, she had mapped the basic patterns of the sound system. Marta introduced her to 5 more speakers. Each one added something new. Have you ever felt that you were exactly where you were supposed to be? Ruby felt that now. On the morning of her 3rd week, Ruby received an email. It was from the university's legal department. Her former supervisor had submitted a claim. He stated that all research materials she had gathered during her employment belonged to the university. That included her field notes, her recordings, her analysis documents. He was claiming the recordings she had made here in this village on her own time, with her own money. Ruby sat down on the stone step. She read the email 3 times. She thought about giving up. The thought was real and strong. She had been here before, the same cold feeling, the same closed throat, but something was different now. She looked up at the valley. Somewhere across the ridge, Tomas was probably starting his morning. Maybe he was already whistling to someone, carrying a message across the open air, trusting that it would arrive. Ruby thought about Marta, about every person in this village who had held on to something precious when the world kept telling them to let it go. She was not the same person who had sat on that parking lot in the cold. Ruby did not panic. That was the first difference. She called a colleague from her old university, a woman named Petra who worked in academic law. Petra told her that research conducted independently, outside working hours with personal funds, did not belong to the university. Ruby had the receipts. She had her personal notebooks. She had the dates. She organized every document carefully. She sent Petra a full record. She wrote a clear and factual response to the legal claim herself. She did not use angry words. She used exact words. Meanwhile, she kept working. Every morning, she went out with Marta. She recorded. She listened. She learned 3 whistled phrases herself. Her lips were not shaped for it yet, but she practiced. Petra sent back a single message. She said the claim had no legal ground. It was dismissed. Ruby read that message. She felt something release in her chest. She had not waited to be rescued. She had solved it herself, quietly, carefully, with everything she had learned. 6 months later, Ruby stood on a mountain path at dawn. The valley below was endless and green. Mist moved slowly between the ridges. The air was cool and thin. She held very still. Then she heard it, long and curved, rising and falling, moving through the trees and crossing the open sky. She did not turn her head in confusion. She smiled. She knew exactly what it was. Tomas was calling from the far ridge. He was asking if the researcher was ready. Ruby pressed her lips together. She breathed in, and she whistled back. Her answer traveled across the valley. It was not perfect, but it was clear, and it arrived. Before she had spent her days recording sounds other people made. Now she was making them herself. Her published research on the whistled language had already reached 12 universities. 3 of them had written to ask for access to her recordings. 2 had offered to fund continued fieldwork. She had come here to save a language. But something else had happened too. She had found her own voice again. Ruby stayed in the village through the summer. Before she left, she did one last thing. She sat with the youngest members of the community. There were 5 children between the ages of 8 and 12. She set up her recorder. She played them the whistled conversations she had captured. The children listened with total silence. Then one girl, perhaps 10 years old, pressed her lips together and tried to copy a sound. It was not right, but it was close. Marta, sitting nearby, laughed softly. Something passed between all of them in that moment. Not a word, not a sound, just a feeling of something continuing. Ruby thought about the lesson she had carried home without knowing it. It was simple. She wrote it in the front page of her newest notebook. She looked at it for a long time. When Ruby returned to her city, she started teaching. Not at the university at first, in a small community room. 8 people came to the first session. They listened to her recordings. They learned what a whistled language was. Some of them had never thought about sound as a living thing. Now they did. Have you ever listened to something and felt the world become a little larger? That is where all good journeys begin.